Hello, everyone. I understand that I'm not who you were expecting to see here. My name is Joey, and I had the incredible fortune of being one of Jamie's three son in laws. If you're seeing me now, you have probably assumed, and you have assumed correctly, that Jamie has sadly passed away. He passed away July 14th at 10:45 in the morning, surrounded and embraced by his wonderful children, one of which I have the pleasure of calling my wife. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm not as good at these things as Jamie was, but he had a few things he would have wanted to address, and a few things he would have wanted said, and so I wanted to make one last video for his channel to say those things. So we are going to go over three things mostly: who he was, the failings of the healthcare system during his battle with cancer, and finally, you, the YouTube audience. So, my father-in-law, Jaime, was a lot of things, a lot of wonderful things. He was, first and foremost, a father and a family man. He had three wonderful children, again, one of whom I have the pleasure of calling my wife. And across those three children, he had 7 wonderful grandchildren who loved him very, very dearly. He was a play hard and work hard kind of guy. Very proud of his business achievements and the things he did through work. But when he wasn't working, he loved to play hard. He loved to take vacations, go to Florida, Disney World, Universal Studios. He loved to take trips just down to the States, to Maine, to go on vacations and trips and just to have a great time. And even when he was home, he loved hangouts and having everybody over and singing karaoke or sitting by a bonfire. That was his thing. And when he played hard, he did all of those things, if allowed, with family as much as he could. And he was simply fantastic to be around. He was an absolutely wonderful time. But he wasn't just a wonderful father. He was also an incredible son. I have been with my wife since 2009. And when I entered the picture, his father had sadly passed away, but he talked about him all the time. He idolized him. He was a great son. He really loved his parents very much. I did have the honor of meeting Grammy, his mother. She sadly passed away in 2013. But from the time I met him, and for years prior to that, he would work his very busy job at 9 to 5, and he would come home every single day, and he would make her meals, and he would sit with her, and he would do all of these things. And it was a lot. It was basically a full-time job with him, but he loved his mother very much, and so he took that on thanklessly until she passed. And Mom, if you're watching this, I'm real sorry, but like, it was incredible to see, including myself. I don't know of many people who have that kind of strength to do those kinds of things. He was really, for years, he dedicated himself. And he was also just a fun human being. He loved music, going to concerts, listening to oldies. I have had the pleasure of living with him, either in the upstairs unit, this is his house, or the downstairs unit opposed to him, for 11 wonderful years. And throughout all those 11 years, I could always hear the blaring of the Beatles or Elvis Presley, or Michael Jackson, or 1,001 other bands, because the man knew more music than I ever will in my lifetime. He was a student of history, all history, world history, and as a result, he loved politics. And while he and I weren't always on the same side politically, we had a wonderful, all in the family, Archie meathead kind of relationship sometimes. But we loved talking about this stuff. And we loved, when the elections were going on, when anything big would go down in the States, he would be texting me, "Did you see this? Did you see this? It's on CNN right now." And it's awesome. It's a big part of our relationship. He loved history. He loved politics. He loved music. He loved being a father. He loved all those things very, very much. That was a large part of who he was. The other part of who he was all business. Jaime was very proud of his business achievements, very proud. And he put in the work. He was the embodiment, the encyclopedia definition of climbing the ladder. He would often tell me about his entire career path, the whole way up, from I think Harrison Room where he started, and eventually he found his way to RBC, and then RBC got bought out by ADP, and ADP was where he worked until he retired. And he started off there, and he ascended all the way to the vice president of implementations. He was a vice president. I would come home, and he would just be on conference calls and like with his boss or with the CEO and stuff like that. And he'd just be like, "Dirt in the fridge." Just unbelievable. Unbelievable. He really had incredible business sense. He developed products for his business. He launched products. He was basically the vice president of implementation. So he headed the implementations team of onboarding new clients for ADP. It meant a lot to him. I know these things because he talked about them regularly. He was very, very fond of the work that he had achieved. And that is really the kind of person who he was. Work hard, play hard, and just a wonderful father and son and friend and father-in-law, of course. The other thing he would have wanted covered off was the healthcare system, the Nova Scotia healthcare system, that largely failed him during this process. And I want to be clear that this is criticism of the system, not criticism of any individual healthcare practitioner who is struggling within this system to do their very best. The system as a whole that failed him. Now, I have some notes. I apologize if I look down a little bit, but he would care about the details being known, okay? So, essentially, I took Jaime in to his initial doctor's visit at the hospital because he hadn't been feeling well. This was on May 19th. And it was on May 19th that he was told that he had, at the time, liver cancer, and that it was incurable and inoperable, and that an oncologist would be in contact. And they were. Over a month later, on June 24th, when he had his oncology appointment. At this oncology appointment, he was given his timeline, which was if he accepted chemo treatment, which they thought would be on the table, he may have upwards of 6 to 12 months. They told him without that, he would have between 2 to 6 months. At this very same appointment, Jaime fell, and unfortunately, he hit his head on the curb, and he was not examined, and he simply received this news and went home at that point. He received his first chemotherapy treatment a few days later on June 27th, and it got pretty much consistently downhill and worse from there. He faced very severe constipation. He didn't have a bowel movement for 3 weeks, and during most of that, he often joked that was worse than the liver cancer, that the constipation simply drove him marbles. He was told that if he did not have a bowel movement by July 2nd, to please go into the hospital. He had friends coming to see him on July 2nd, so he went in on July 3rd. And when he was in, he had to be on the 3rd, taken in by ambulance, because he could not even walk at that point. When he was at emergency, the emergency department at the first hospital, at the Copquid, they opened up all of his bed sores that he had because he'd been pretty much stuck on the couch. They opened up those sores, and then when he got to the next hospital at the Queen Elizabeth II, they gave him an intense laxative. I don't really need to tell you what happened next, but that was gravely uncomfortable for him, and he never ended up getting a bed, because there were no beds available outside of the emergency department for the 2-day duration that he was there. And he left on the 5th after having a bowel movement, finally. But he hated the experience of that very, very much, of being stuck in the uncomfortable emergency bed instead of being up in a room, because it just one never became available for him. He had to get blood work on the 6th, 7th, and 8th following that, July 6th, 7th, and 8th. He went to the appointment for the 6th, the 7th, but he was rejected at the Cobequid for the appointment of the 8th because they just didn't have the paperwork for it, I guess. So he went back for an appointment on the 9th to the Cobequid. And on that day, he also spoke with the oncologist. And the oncologist told his daughters that at that point on July 9th that he was in the phase of actively dying. And I would like to note that from this point forward, every other person that they ever spoke to was aggressively informed that he was actively dying and did not have very much time left. So they asked if he could have a bed at the hospital and some medication because of how much pain he was in, and because he was willing to go at that point. He was denied, and he was told that palliative care would be in touch within the next couple weeks. We again expressed that he didn't have that long. On the 10th of July, we had friends and family come visit him because the assumption was that the time was not long. And he had his visitations, but ultimately he spent most of July 10th asleep. Which, on the 11th, palliative care finally called. It was more of an update call. We requested a bed within palliative care because we told them that he was no longer eating, he was no longer drinking, he was no longer going to the bathroom, that things were very dire, and that he needed a bed in palliative care. They said that they would be in touch by the 16th of July, and that a continuing care team would be out to see him tomorrow to assess him. On the next day, on July 12th, the continuing care team did come out to assess him. They said they would begin the process to begin at-home palliative care. But that never came to pass. That night, sadly, Jaime fell off of the couch and onto the floor. And that was a bit of an ambulance was called again that morning. And that morning, he was taken to the first hospital, and where we were told that this was going to be the end. He was transferred to the second hospital at 2 p.m., where we were told, the Queen Elizabeth II, where we were told a bed would be waiting for him. The bed was not waiting for him when he got there, and he had to stay in emergency until 5:30. He finally did get in his room at 8 o'clock that night. At 5:30, around 5:30 when he got to that room, they said that they would begin the medication for comfort and to help him pass peacefully. And they said that this medication would be happening every hour on the hour to ensure comfortability. And this was not the case. It was frequently longer than an hour. And the dosages were very, very low. They were 1 milligram doses of the pain medication that he had been taking at home, of which he was taking 6 milligram dosages of. So it took quite some time to get the dosage right. They finally got it right at 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 3 o'clock in the morning of July 14th, he was finally resting and comfortable. He passed 7 hours and 45 minutes later at 10:45 a.m. that Sunday on July 14th, after having been miserably uncomfortable for the 13 hours prior to that. The severity simply wasn't listened to for a lot of the time, and it wasn't the fault of any one system or any one person. There just did not seem to be the resources to make it as much of a priority as it needed to be. And he was very upset. Jaime was very upset in these years gone by with our Premier, Tim Houston, who ran an election campaign on fixing the healthcare system. And in all honesty, all of those problems simply seem to have been exacerbated since he has taken office. And Jaime would have liked that on the record. Finally, on a happier note, that brings me to all of you, the YouTube audience. I, having grown up in the 90s and late 80s, I grew up with the internet, and having friends online and having friends on the internet was something that was comfortable to me. he was just starting to discover how fun that can be. And I mean this with all sincerity. It was one of his wishes that somebody in the family make this final video for him. You guys, this channel, keeping it up and replying to the comments and so on and so forth, really fulfilled something in his life wonderfully. He talked about it all the time. He was excited to make new videos. He was excited to get new ideas, but he was mostly excited to hear what the people had to say, and the comments and the things that people had to say, and the places that they were commenting from all over the world. He loved it. He loved doing this, and he would have done this, I am sure, for years and years to come. And it was important to him that one last video be made to inform his audience of his passing and who he was and all that he had gone through. Of course, we will be leaving the channel up as testament and as memory, because the man loved the video camera, which is wonderful for us and for his grandkids, as if I were to string all the footage of this man end to end, they could simply watch it for weeks, I think, if not months, without running out. And that's really, really lovely. If I could encourage you to do anything, go back to the earlier part of the channel, and more so focus on a lot of, he loved doing the fast food reviews. So once he got into those, he really loved doing those. So he started on them pretty hard. But if you really want to get to know my father-in-law, Jaime, his recipes are what you should go watch. He loved to cook. We would watch Gordon Ramsay shows on the Food Network and stuff like that together all the time. And, you know, whenever we were on vacations, going out to eat at some of the restaurants was often our favorite part. So I would encourage you to check out some of his recipes, which are mostly, I think, in the earlier part of the channel. So all of that being said, I will miss him. We will all miss him, but I will miss him. I've lived upstairs or downstairs opposite of him for 11 years. My kids have knocked on his door after school almost every day for a treat since they started. One way or another, I'll flush the toilet and hear him scream downstairs when I burn him in the shower. I will miss him. And his home and his property, and he was very, very proud of that. And I will be here forever, and I will ensure that that goes on in his name and in his honor and in his memory. So take care of each other. Hug your loved ones. Be kind. On behalf of Jaime, this is Joey, signing off.